Hello everybody, this is Leah from Nerd Girl Power and welcome to my YouTube channel. Now, I know I haven't been around much recently, but I've been busy, tax season and all that. So I've kind of fell into a void there, or if you prefer, since this is a Stephen King based channel, I fell into the Todash space that is tax season. But no longer tax season. That April 15th deadline has come and gone, so I am back. You miss me much? Well, thanks to both, or is it all of you who watch? But I am back, and I plan on making this to be a more regular thing, because I have lots of stuff I want to talk about. And today I am here to discuss the Pet Sematary 2019 movie. I went and saw this a few weeks ago, carved out some time out of my day to go watch this, and I want to discuss it. So, that's what I'm here today to do. And there is lots to discuss, I think, on this one, so buckle up and get ready. And from this point forward, there will be spoilers for both the source material and the film. So I just wanted to warn you of that, because I will be spoiling both in my discussion. So from this point forward, if you have either not read the book or not seen this movie, you might want to keep that in mind. So, now that we've got that out of the way, now, Pet Sematary, I read this book when I was probably about 13, maybe 14 years old, and obviously that's a pretty young age to be reading something like Pet Sematary. And I saw the 1989 movie at some point too. Why I didn't get committed to Juniper Hill at that point is something that's beyond me. And, get it, Juniper Hill, Stephen King's version of Arkham Asylum. Ha ha ha. Anyway, but yeah, the book scared the pants off of me. The movie, it frightened me pretty badly too, but I don't think any film version of this can ever frighten me as much as a book can, because it is just probably one of the scariest, if not the scariest books I've ever read, and I definitely have argued in the past that it's Stephen King's scariest book. And the 1989 movie was frightening too, but like I said, this book, it is just frightening. To summarize the story, it centers around the Creed family, and in the film they move from Boston to a small town in Ludlow, Maine, out in the country, and the only drawback is their house is on a busy road where a lot of trucks go flying by, and this is going to factor in later on in the story for obvious reasons. And the Creed family consists of Lewis, who's a doctor, his wife Rachel, who is a mother to their children. Ellie is the older child. She's 8 years old in this movie, I believe. And Gage is the going on 3-year-old toddler. So that seems idyllic for them. And the Creeds, they also have a cat. His name is Church. He's a Maine Coon cat, dark gray, just a sweet cat. And they have a neighbor who becomes almost kind of like another family member to them, and the neighbor's name is Judd Crandall. Judd is elderly. He's not specified to be, I don't think the age is specified in the movie, but I'm guessing he's probably at least in his 70s, if not closer to 80. And he's somebody that's lived in the town of Ludlow almost his whole life, and he's also widowed. And implied to be childless, as he has no family member nearby, which is kind of part of the reason why the Creeds become close to him. But one evening, tragedy ensues when the Creeds' cat, Church, wanders out to the road and is hit by one of those Orinco trucks we previously discussed. Lewis and Ellie struggle with telling Lewis and Rachel, struggle with telling Ellie what happened because this was Ellie's cat, and talking about the death of a pet to an 8-year-old. I can't imagine having that conversation. So, Judd, being the ever neighborly person that he is, tells Lewis he knows of a place where he can bury the cat, Church. And it's beyond, earlier in the story, Ellie had discovered a cemetery where it was a pet cemetery where the local children had a tradition of burying their pets because apparently a lot of them get killed on that highway. So they have this spot beyond the Creed's a little bit beyond the Creed's property that's actually part of the Creed's property where they bury those animals. And, it's sad, but it's also kind of cute too. You read all the inscriptions on the gravestones and so forth. And it just seems like kind of a harmless local tradition. Well, Judd takes Lewis someplace beyond that pet cemetery, and it's an ancient Micmac Native American burial ground, and they bury Church there. And of course the place is cursed or has magical powers or what have you, and the next day Church comes back. And he's not the same cat that he was. You can tell that he's different. He's mean, and he scratches Ellie, and he stinks, and blah, 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 but at least Ellie has her cat back. So the Creeds avoid having that conversation with her. Well, a few months later, Ellie is celebrating her birthday, and tragedy strikes again. As Ellie runs out into the road, lured out there seemingly by Church, and she's struck by one of those trucks and killed pretty much instantly. Of course, her parents are beside themselves with grief. It's the loss of a child, and nobody knows what to do with themselves, understandably so. But Lewis remembers the pet cemetery, or what's beyond the pet cemetery, rather. And he decides that he is going to bury his daughter there. So he makes a trip up down there, and buries her. Ellie comes back, and we quickly learn that Ellie, much like Church, isn't the same version of what she was in life. She's possessed by whatever haunts that Micmac burial ground, and things turn violent and tragic rather quickly. Rachel comes back to the house because she's lured back, or maybe she just has a bad feeling. She knows that Lewis is up to something. She's killed by her daughter. Ellie buries Rachel in the pet cemetery. Of course, she comes back to life. Lewis is then murdered by his wife and daughter, buried, and he's come back to life. So we have a family of zombies. And the movie ends with the family closing in on Gage, who's been in the car by himself left there by Rachel for at least a couple hours, and they're closing in on him, so presumably the same fate happens to him, and the family is cursed in both life and death. So, let's talk about my thoughts on this film, because I have a few of them. Some good, some bad. Overall, I enjoyed this movie. I thought it was actually a pretty good remake, and I don't often say that because some remakes just shouldn't be done. And I do enjoy some of them. This one was good. It 2017, I thought, was really good, although we'll talk about that for another episode. So I enjoyed this. I'm giving it a 7 out of 10 because there's stuff I like about it, but there is also stuff I dislike. So let's talk about my dislikes first. One of the things I did not like about this movie was the fact that we just didn't have very much John Lithgow in it as Judd Crandall. Now, Judd Crandall is iconic for this story, and John Lithgow is one of our greatest actors, probably of my lifetime. But I feel like he got shortchanged in this, and we needed more of John Lithgow and more Judd Crandall, because he really is a central character to this story, and I think this movie made him more of a supporting character, which I think was a disservice to the story and to him. So that was one of the things I did not like. So more John Lithgow. And let's get into, and this kind of ties into another thing that I thought was wrong with this film. And to me, it felt rushed. There was a lot of undeveloped storylines to it. One of them would be just the history of the Micmac burial ground and the Wendigo. Because you see Lewis doing some internet research on those burial grounds, and you see something about a person that was buried there in the past, somebody who was in the Vietnam War, and a child of somebody, and that person got killed, or that guy, I presume, got killed in Vietnam, and somebody buried him in the pet cemetery. And there's a hint about a fire and an attack and so forth, but then the movie just kind of cuts it off and leaves it at that, and I found that to be very frustrating, because one of the creepiest parts of the source material was a World War I veteran who was just a kid who got buried in that cemetery and came back to life. And Judd and his friends had to go up against this creature, because he wasn't a man anymore after being in the cemetery. Had to go up against this creature, and there was a fight, and presumably Judd went up against the Wendigo, who had it in for him for all these years. And that's what happened in the book, and I can assume there's something like that. It's supposed to be like that in this movie, but we never really got any background on it, and I found that to be a little bit frustrating. So, I mean, and this comes back to, we needed a longer movie because it was under 2 hours. And if they went at 2 hours, or maybe, even a little over 2 hours, like 2 hours and 15 minutes, we could have possibly have gotten gotten that backstory in, and also had, more of Judd and more of John Lithgow, more character development and background for him, which would have, really have improved this movie. Another issue I had with this movie was its interpretation of Zelda. I mean, Zelda, when you talk to people about this movie, Zelda is going to be something that comes up. Zelda was Rachel's sister, and she died of meningitis as a child. Rachel was forced to take care of her sister even as her sister was dying. So, of course, Rachel has developed a fear of death and doesn't handle that subject very well, which bleeds over into how she parents her children and how she deals with the subject with Ellie when the pet cemetery comes up. And the way they interpreted Zelda was not a flashback or a memory of Rachel's. It almost seemed like she was a ghost haunting the house. And this is a movie about a cursed burial ground and grief and our reactions to it and what we'll do when we're under grief spell. So having Zelda as a ghost almost turns it into a haunted house story, and I don't feel like that mixed very well. Now, the actress that played Zelda, I thought she was pretty good, and the flashback scenes were pretty good. It really captured how frightened Rachel must have been. And I also loved the scenes with the dumbwaiter, and I thought that that was really creepy. But trying to make this into a haunted house story, I don't know if that was their intention or not, but for me, it didn't work. And it didn't have the impact that it should have. And it just confused things and muddied up the story a bit. So that was one thing. That was another thing I just did not care for. And that could be improved upon so much. But, this is what we got. And huge, huge missed opportunity there, in my opinion. Okay, so we've talked about what I didn't like. Now let's talk about what I liked. And I actually found that there was a lot to like in this reimagining of one of Stephen King's most famous tales. One of the things I absolutely loved was the performances in this movie. I thought that they were all pretty good. What stood out to me was Jette Lawrence, the actress who played Ellie. I thought that she was fabulous as Ellie. She was cute, but very realistic. I was like, that could almost be my little sister or my niece. She was, just very, she was relatable. And the actress, Jette Lawrence, if she continues on this path, she's going to go places. So I just loved her performance. I also think that the producers and writers made a very smart move when I thought that the writers made a smart move when they changed it to Ellie being the one that was hit by the truck as opposed to Gage, because we all know that in the book and in the 1989 adaptation, Gage is the one that's struck by the vehicle. But the producers made a wise move here, I thought, and they changed that, and Ellie was the one struck by the vehicle. Does that make anything less tragic? No, absolutely not. That's still somebody's child being taken away way, way too soon. And the reactions from parents, I don't think would be any different no matter which one of their children gets taken away, because that's their children, whether they're 3 or 8 or 15 or 55. Losing a child is one of the most horrible things that can happen to a person, and that kind of grief never goes away. So Ellie gets killed by the truck, And she comes back. She's older, so she understands what happened to her, that she's in fact dead. It would be hard to imagine that if Gage got struck that he would understand that he was dead. But Ellie understands that she was dead, that she was killed by the truck, that her parents tried to get to her, but they couldn't. They just missed. So you can sense that within her. And then when the Wendigo begins to make its appearance via Ellie, it's horribly frightening. And I just, there's just some scenes that I'll never get out of my mind, because Ellie was, striving to be a ballerina in life, and there's a part in the early part of the movie where she puts on a little dance for her parents and Judd, and it's so cute, and just kind of like, aw. And when she comes back from the dead, possessed by the Wendigo, she does the same thing, but it's a perversion of what was. She's just destroying everything in her path, and it's not cute, and it's probably a pretty good metaphor for what that burial ground does, is just destroy everything that it ever touches, and takes away everything good, which is exactly what it did with Ellie. I also found the scene where Lewis is giving her a bath after she comes back from the dead. I found that scene to be just really poignant, striking, and just eerie. It mirrors a scene earlier where Church comes back and Ellie's trying to give him a bath and combing the knots out of his fur, and you know that he's going to attack her, and he does, and she gets scratched. And her dad's basically doing the same thing for her, and you can see the stitches on her head, and the sutures from when she got struck by the truck, and just the filth from the burial ground in her hair. You can see all that, and you know that it's not going to be good because of what Church did earlier. She doesn't scratch her dad, but a little later on, she kills her mother and stabs her, and they end up killing Lewis, so that's a little bit of foreshadowing there, and I thought that was really creepy. I also love the performance of Jason Clarke as Lewis Creed. I believed him, as a doctor and a family man. I had a hard time with that with Dale Midkiff in the 1989 version, because I just looked at him and all I saw was a Calvin Klein underwear model. But Jason Clarke, he was completely believable as Lewis Creed, and his reaction to when his daughter dies, it's just, it's so sad, and he brings that across very, very well. You completely believed him, for what he was. I also, and you guys are probably going to think I'm crazy for bringing up this particular performer, but let's talk about Church of Cat for a minute. Yeah, the cat. Let's talk about the cat, or the cats, because there were 4 cats that played this role. And according to the rest of the cast, they were a pack of divas. And I'm still finding this to be very, very funny. In fact, I'm thinking that the scientific name for a pack of cats, or a group of cats, should be a pack of divas. So hopefully, somebody listens to me on that and we make that change. But anyway, I really enjoyed the interpretation of Church the Cat in this reimagining. They made him to be a Maine Coon, which is actually something closer to what he was in the book. And he was really unnerving because he starts off as a sweet kitty, and he'll just jump into anybody's lap, and He's just always purring. But then he gets buried in that cursed burial ground, and he comes back and is just... I kept thinking of that old Nickelodeon cartoon about the cat that came back and Mr. Johnson couldn't get rid of it. I think that still has me ruined even as an adult. I don't know if anybody else feels that way, but I just kept thinking the cat came back. They thought he was a goner. And they, church was haunting the Creeds because he was possessed by the Wendigo. And he's, definitely possessed by the Wendigo in this film. When Ellie's trying to, brush him out after he comes back from the cemetery, like I said before, and he scratches her, that's just, it's really creepy. And the fact that Lewis tries to get rid of him, and Lewis originally looks like he intends to, put Church down, but then Church starts purring, and I think this is obviously because he's possessed by the Wendigo, possessed by that burial ground, so he's able to trick Lewis into not killing him. And then Church comes back, and he lures Ellie to her death. He's just out in the road, and she comes after him, and you can't tell me that was not on purpose. So she's lured to her death by this cat that's not really a cat, and that just sets in motion a chain of events. So I thought how they tied this cat into everything, not just being a pet that came back to life when it should be dead, but actively, consciously evil. I thought that was very smart writing, and I quite enjoyed that as well. So, let's talk about something else that everybody's talking about, and that would be the ending to this movie. And personally, I really like this ending. I mean, this story is a dark story, and we knew it was going to have a dark ending, because the book has a dark ending. The movie from 1999 basically has that same dark ending. Well, this reimagining has a dark ending, and it takes it one step further than the source material, I think. We presume that the entire family ends up cursed by these burial grounds, because I'm sure that they get to Gage as well. So now we've got an entire family of zombies, and there's no hope for them. Originally, Lewis kills the cat, and he ends up killing his son too, but not in this case. Everybody's still undead, as opposed to, well, not alive, but undead. So we can only, speculate what happens. So I'm guessing that Ludlow now has a haunted house by a family of the flesh-eating zombies. And who knows if they get to anybody else. I mean, it's possible that they could, because I'm sure that somebody's going to go check on this family, and there'll be a nasty surprise. I'm sure local law enforcement will go check things out, and there'll be more nasty surprises. So God only knows what happens, to this town and to that house after the entire Creed family is now undead and possesses, these ungodly powers. that'll allow them to really do some harm. So, I mean, just sitting there thinking about what happened and how now we have this cursed area, that's just, you know, it's something that might keep you up at night. So I think that the producers, I like this ending. I know it's controversial, but I like this ending. I think that this was a good ending to this story, and it still keeps with the spirit of the book. But it adds, you know, a new, really, really creepy twist. So I think that this was a good move by the producers and the writers to have it in this way. So I give it a thumbs up. So my 7 out of 10 still stands. I love a lot about this movie. There's some parts I really don't like, but what I do like, I really actually ended up loving for the most part. So I think this is a pretty solid remake. And I don't know if it's ever going to go down as a classic, but I still think it's one of King's more solid adaptations. And I quite enjoyed it. So it is definitely worth seeing. I'll be watching it again because I'm sure there's parts to it and little Easter eggs that I didn't catch the first time around. But I'm going to have to conclude this for today. Like I said, I am going to make an attempt to be doing this more often, hopefully at least on a weekly basis, because again, there's a lot of stuff I want to talk about. So I hope to be talking to you all really soon here. And as always, may your days be long upon the earth.